No good deed goes unpunished. That's what 26-year-old Chloe Bennett thought when her tyrannical manager fired her for buying a hot meal for a shivering, homeless man. But what Chloe didn't know was that the ragged stranger sitting in booth 4 wasn't homeless at all. He owned the entire company. The neon sign above the entrance of the Rusty Anchor Seafood and Grill had been flickering for 3 months. It cast a sickly, erratic red glow over the wet Seattle pavement, a perfect reflection of the restaurant's current state. Chloe Bennett pushed a stray lock of damp blonde hair behind her ear and balanced a tray carrying 3 heavy plates of fried cod and a bowl of clam chowder. Her feet, encased in cheap, slip-resistant shoes, throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. It was her 7th consecutive day working a double shift, but with rent due in 48 hours and her 4-year-old daughter, Lily, needing a new winter coat, exhaustion was a luxury she couldn't afford. The Rusty Anchor was a flagship location for the massive Miller Hospitality Group, but lately it felt more like a sinking ship. The reason for the decline was pacing angrily near the host stand. Brenda Higgins. Brenda was the general manager, a woman who wore too much cheap floral perfume and treated the restaurant like her own personal fiefdom. She was obsessed with cutting costs, not to save the company money, but to inflate her own quarterly bonuses. Under Brenda's rule, the staff was miserable, the food quality had plummeted, and the health code was treated as a loose set of suggestions rather than the law. "Table 7 is complaining about the fish again, Chloe," Brenda barked, her acrylic nails tapping furiously against her clipboard. "Tell them it's the new batter, and don't you dare offer them a comp. We aren't running a charity." Chloe swallowed her frustration. "Yes, Brenda." She dropped off the food, plastering on a bright customer service smile that didn't reach her tired eyes, and rushed back to the wait station to refill waters. The dinner rush was hitting its peak. The air was thick with the smell of old fryer oil and burnt garlic. Just as the grandfather clock in the dining room struck 7, the brass bell above the front door jingled. The man who walked in brought the bitter November chill with him. He was elderly, hunched over, and leaning heavily on a wooden cane. He wore a faded, oversized trench coat that looked like it hadn't been washed in a decade, and a worn wool beanie was pulled down low over his ears. His hands, gripping the handle of the cane, were trembling violently. Rainwater dripped from his frayed collar onto the polished hardwood floor. The bustling restaurant seemed to pause. A nearby family stopped eating, the mother subtly pulling her purse closer to her side. Brenda, who had been berating a teenage busboy for using too many paper towels, snapped her head toward the entrance. Her eyes narrowed into predatory slits. She marched over to the front door, her heels clicking aggressively against the floorboards. "Excuse me," Brenda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that thinly veiled her disgust. "The restrooms are for paying customers only. You need to leave." The old man looked up, his pale blue eyes bloodshot and weary. I'm not here for the restroom, ma'am," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "I have a few dollars. I just wanted a cup of hot coffee and maybe a bowl of soup. It's freezing out there." Brenda crossed her arms. "We are at capacity, and frankly, we have a dress code. You are dripping water everywhere and disturbing my guests. Out, now." Chloe, who had been watching from the wait station, felt a tight knot form in her chest. She remembered the nights, just a few years ago, before she landed this job, when she and Lily had slept in her beat-up Honda Civic, the biting cold seeping through the windows. She knew what that kind of shivering meant. It was the chill that settled deep into your bones. Before she could stop herself, Chloe stepped forward. "Brenda, wait." Brenda turned, her perfectly drawn-on eyebrows shooting up to her hairline. "Excuse me, Chloe. Are your tables completely bust? Because if not, you have no business interrupting me." "He's clearly freezing, Brenda," Chloe said, keeping her voice low so the dining room wouldn't hear. "Look at him. He's not hurting anyone. Let him sit in my section. Booth 4 is empty, and it's tucked away in the corner. I'll take care of him." "Absolutely not," Brenda hissed, leaning in close so Chloe could smell the stale cigarette smoke beneath the floral perfume. "Look at him, Chloe. He smells like a damp alleyway. He's going to drive away people who actually tip. I said he leaves." "I'll pay for his meal," Chloe blurted out. The words left her mouth before her brain could calculate her bank balance. $32 to her name until payday. "I'll use my employee discount, and I'll pay for whatever he orders. He's my guest." Brenda stared at her, her jaw tight. She hated being challenged, especially by a waitress she viewed as entirely expendable. But Brenda also loved taking her employees' money. "Fine," Brenda whispered, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Booth 4, but if a single customer complains about him, you're paying for their meal too. And Chloe, your shift just got extended. You're closing tonight." Chloe nodded, ignoring the sinking feeling in her stomach. "Thank you." She walked over to the shivering man, offering a gentle, genuine smile. "Hi there. My name is Chloe. Let's get you out of this wet coat and into a warm booth, okay?" The old man looked at her, surprise flickering in his pale eyes. "You don't have to do that, miss. The manager clearly doesn't want me here." "I don't care what the manager wants," Chloe said softly, guiding him by the elbow. "You're my guest tonight." Chloe seated the man, who introduced himself simply as Arthur, in the back corner booth, safely hidden from Brenda's direct line of sight. She immediately brought him a steaming mug of black coffee and a basket of warm rolls. "Drink this before you order," she instructed gently. "It'll help get the feeling back in your hands." "You are very kind, Chloe," Arthur murmured, wrapping his trembling hands around the ceramic mug. He took a slow sip, closing his eyes in quiet relief. "It's rare to find such warmth in a place that feels so chaotic." Chloe chuckled bitterly, wiping down the table next to him. "Chaotic is one word for it. It's just a tough night. What can I get for you? The clam chowder is usually good, and I highly recommend the meatloaf." "The meatloaf sounds wonderful," Arthur said. "Are you sure you won't get in trouble? I heard what that woman said to you." "Don't worry about Brenda," Chloe lied smoothly. "I've got it covered. You just focus on warming up." As she punched in his order at the POS terminal, using her own swipe card to apply the 50% employee discount and authorize the deduction from her next paycheck, the kitchen doors burst open. Brenda came storming out, her face flushed with rage. "Who threw out the Friday salmon?" Brenda screamed at the shift supervisor, a young guy named David. "Brenda, it's Sunday," David argued defensively. "The fish was grey. It smelled like ammonia. We can't serve that to people." "I decide what we serve," Brenda shrieked, entirely unbothered by the fact that half the dining room could hear her. "Do you know what food cost means, David? You cut the bad parts off, you bread it heavily, and you fry it. Do not ever throw away inventory without my permission." Chloe grimaced, quickly grabbing Arthur's meatloaf from the pass-through window to avoid the crossfire. She delivered the plate to the old man, who was watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. "Is it always like this?" Arthur asked quietly, picking up his fork. Chloe sighed, leaning against the edge of the booth for just a fraction of a second to relieve her aching heels. "Lately, yeah. Brenda is under a lot of pressure, I guess. Corporate has been breathing down our necks about profit margins, so she's cutting corners everywhere. And the staff suffers for it, Arthur noted, slicing into his meatloaf. We just need the work, Chloe admitted, her defenses lowering for a moment. Most of us are just trying to keep the lights on. You put up with a lot when you have mouths to feed at home. Arthur paused, looking up at her. You have children? A little girl, Lily. She's 4. Chloe smiled, reaching into her apron pocket to pull out a small, laminated photo she carried with her. She showed it to him. She's my whole world. It's why I'm working this double shift. Arthur stared at the photo for a long time. She has your eyes. You're a good mother, Chloe. And a good person. This restaurant is lucky to have you, even if management is too blind to see it. Chloe felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, Arthur. Enjoy your meal. Over the next hour, the rush finally began to die down. Chloe checked on Arthur several times, refilling his coffee and bringing him a complimentary slice of cherry pie that the kitchen had accidentally baked an extra of. Arthur ate quietly, occasionally pulling a small, battered leather notebook from his coat pocket and writing something down with a stubby pencil. Chloe assumed he was doing crossword puzzles or journaling to pass the time. At 9 o'clock, Arthur finally stood up. He looked significantly better. The color had returned to his cheeks, and the violent trembling in his hands had ceased. He slipped his worn trench coat back on. I can't thank you enough, Chloe, he said, handing her the empty coffee mug. You saved an old man from a very dark night. It was my pleasure, Arthur. Please be safe out there. Arthur gave her a nod, tipped his wool beanie, and shuffled out the front door, disappearing into the rainy Seattle night. Chloe began to clear his booth. Beneath the ceramic saucer of his coffee cup, she found a single, crumpled $1 bill. It was a meager tip by any standard, but it made Chloe smile. She knew it was probably all he had. Beneath the dollar bill was a napkin with a hastily scribbled note in surprisingly elegant cursive. Your kindness is the only thing keeping this ship afloat. Keep your head up. Oh, look at the bleeding heart. A sharp, sarcastic voice sneered from behind her. Chloe jumped, spinning around. Brenda was standing there, holding a printed merchant receipt. It was the itemized ticket for Arthur's meal, showing the employee discount and the employee ID attached to the payment. You actually paid for that filthy vagrant's food, Brenda said, her voice dripping with venom. I thought you were just putting on a show to make me look bad. But no, you're actually that stupid. I promised I would pay for it, Brenda. I didn't break any rules, Chloe said, holding her ground, though her heart was beginning to hammer against her ribs. You defied my direct order, Brenda snapped, her voice rising in pitch. A few lingering customers turned their heads. I told you to throw him out. You made a mockery of my authority in front of the entire floor, and then you used company resources, your discount, to subsidize a transient. The discount is a perk of my employment. I can use it on guests. It's in the handbook, Chloe retorted, her own temper finally flaring. And I wasn't making a mockery of you. I was showing basic human decency, something this restaurant is desperately lacking lately. The air in the dining room seemed to porous. Several servers stopped dead in their tracks. No one ever talked back to Brenda. Brenda's face turned a mottled, furious shade of crimson. Her jaw clenched so tight, Chloe thought her teeth might crack. Basic human decency, Brenda whispered dangerously. You want to talk to me about decency, you insubordinate little brat? I run this restaurant. I decide who eats here, who works here, and who gets thrown out on the street. Brenda, please, let's just go into the office. No, we are not going into the office, Brenda yelled, completely losing her composure. You think you're so smart. You think you're better than me because you bought a homeless man a slice of meatloaf? You're a dime a dozen waitress who doesn't know her place." "I need this job, Brenda," Chloe said, her voice cracking as the reality of the situation suddenly crashed down over her. The anger evaporated, replaced by cold terror. "Please, I have Lily. Rent is due on Tuesday." "Should have thought about that before you undermined your general manager," Brenda sneered, pointing a trembling, manicured finger toward the back hallway. "You're done. You are fired, effective immediately. Clear out your locker, hand in your apron, and get the hell out of my restaurant." "Brenda, please. I'll work extra shifts. I'll take the garbage duty." "Security!" Brenda yelled, though they didn't have security. Just David, the shift supervisor, who nervously stepped forward. "David, escort Chloe to the back. If she's not off the premises in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Tears, hot and fast, spilled over Chloe's cheeks. The humiliation was agonizing. She looked around the dining room, seeing the pitying stares of her coworkers and the uncomfortable glances of the customers. There was no fighting it. Brenda had the power, and Brenda was ruthless. Wordlessly, Chloe untied her stained apron and dropped it onto the table she had just wiped clean. She walked to the break room in a daze, grabbed her worn denim jacket, and walked out the back door into the cold, pouring rain. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, sobbing until her lungs ached, wondering how she was going to tell her little girl that they might lose their apartment. The morning sun offered no warmth, only a harsh, glaring light that exposed the water stains on the ceiling of Chloe's cramped, one-bedroom apartment. She sat at her small Formica kitchen table, staring blankly at the glowing screen of her phone. The Wells Fargo app displayed a brutal reality. $32.14 in checking. Rent was $1,200, and it was due tomorrow. From the living room, the sounds of a cartoon played softly, accompanied by the sweet, oblivious giggles of 4-year-old Lily. Chloe pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, trying to stop the fresh wave of tears from falling. She had spent the entire night scouring online job boards, filling out applications for any diner, retail store, or warehouse that was hiring. But the crushing weight of her reality remained unchanged. You couldn't pay rent with pending applications. She was just about to swallow her pride and call a local charity for emergency rental assistance when her phone vibrated against the table. The caller ID read, "Miller Hospitality Group, Corporate HQ." Chloe's stomach dropped. Why was corporate calling her? Had Brenda actually filed trespassing charges? Did they want to withhold her final paycheck? Her hands shook as she swiped the green button to accept the call. "Hello," she answered, her voice tight with anxiety. "Is this Chloe Bennett?" a crisp, professional male voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "Ms. Bennett, my name is Gregory Pierce. I am the Director of Human Resources for Miller Hospitality Group. I'm calling regarding the termination of your employment at the Rusty Anchor last night." Chloe gripped the edge of the table. "Look, Mr. Pierce, I didn't steal anything, and I paid for that man's meal out of my own pocket. I have the bank charge to prove it. Brenda fired me unjustly." "Ms. Bennett, please breathe," Gregory interrupted, his tone surprisingly gentle. "I'm not calling to reprimand you. However, the CEO's office has requested your presence this morning at our downtown headquarters. We need to discuss the events of last night in person. Can you be here at 10 o'clock? Chloe blinked, stunned. The CEO's office? She was just a waitress. Corporate executives didn't get involved in the firing of floor staff. Yes, I can be there, but I don't understand. All will be explained when you arrive. Floor 42. Ask for me at the reception desk. The line went dead. Panic and confusion warred in Chloe's chest, but she didn't have time to process either. She quickly called her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, pleading with her to watch Lily for a few hours. Then she dug through her closet and pulled out the only professional outfit she owned, a simple black skirt and a modest grey blouse she had bought at a thrift store years ago. By 9:45 a.m., Chloe was walking through the revolving glass doors of the towering Miller Hospitality Building in downtown Seattle. The lobby was a cavernous expanse of white marble, brushed steel, and imposing modern art. It felt a million miles away from the grease-stained floors of the Rusty Anchor. She took the express elevator to the 42nd floor, her ears popping as she ascended. When the polished steel doors slid open, she was greeted by a receptionist who immediately escorted her down a long corridor lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. "Mr. Pierce is waiting for you in the executive boardroom," the receptionist said, opening a set of heavy mahogany doors. Chloe stepped inside. The room was breathtaking, dominated by a massive oak conference table. Gregory Pierce, a tall man in a sharp navy suit, stood near the window. But he wasn't alone. Sitting at the head of the table, his back to the door, was a man in a flawlessly tailored charcoal pinstripe suit. His silver hair was neatly trimmed. "Miss Bennett, thank you for coming on such short notice," Gregory said, gesturing to a plush leather chair near the head of the table. "Please have a seat." Chloe sat down, clutching her cheap faux leather purse to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Pierce, I really need to know what's going on. If Brenda is trying to ruin my record so I can't get another job—" "Brenda Higgins has no power here, Chloe," the man at the head of the table said. The voice sent a jolt of pure electricity down Chloe's spine. It was a raspy, warm baritone that she recognized instantly. The man turned his chair around to face her. The scraggly grey beard was gone, replaced by a clean, professional shave. The dirty wool beanie and the soiled trench coat were nowhere to be seen. But the pale blue eyes were exactly the same. Chloe gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. "Arthur?" The man smiled, a genuine, warm expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "In a manner of speaking, my real name is Harrison Miller. I founded the Miller Hospitality Group 43 years ago." Chloe's mind blanked completely. She stared at the billionaire CEO, then back to the HR director, trying to make sense of the impossible reality sitting in front of her. You were the man in the booth. You were shivering. I am an excellent actor when I need to be, though the freezing rain last night certainly helped sell the performance," Harrison said, leaning forward and resting his elbows on the polished oak table. "Chloe, for the last 6 months, our flagship location, the Rusty Anchor, has been hemorrhaging profits, but more importantly, it has been bleeding customer goodwill. The online reviews have been atrocious. The staff turnover is the highest in the company. When I asked Brenda Higgins for an explanation, she blamed the local economy. She blamed the suppliers, and most often, she blamed her incompetent staff." Harrison pulled a familiar battered leather notebook from his suit pocket and placed it on the table. "I decided I needed to see the truth for myself," Harrison continued. "So I went undercover. I've done it a few times over the decades when I suspect a massive failure in leadership. I wanted to see how the most vulnerable person to walk through those doors would be treated. It is the true measure of a restaurant soul." Chloe sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What I witnessed last night appalled me," Harrison said, his voice hardening, the warmth suddenly replaced by the sharp edge of a seasoned CEO. I watched a manager verbally abuse her staff. I heard her order the kitchen to serve spoiled, dangerous seafood to paying customers just to pad her food cost metrics. And then I watched her try to throw a freezing, hungry man back out into the storm. He paused, his eyes softening as he looked directly at Chloe. But then I watched a young waitress, who I knew was working her 7th consecutive day, who I knew was barely making enough to scrape by, risk her job, and sacrifice her own meager funds to buy a stranger a hot meal. You showed compassion, dignity, and leadership when your own manager showed nothing but cruelty. I just did what anyone should have done, Chloe whispered, still reeling from the shock. Unfortunately, basic decency is not as common as it should be, Harrison replied. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom swung open. A secretary poked her head in. "Mr. Miller, she's here." "Send her in," Harrison commanded. A moment later, Brenda Higgins marched into the room. She was wearing her best blazer, a smug, triumphant smile plastered across her face. She clearly thought she had been summoned to corporate to receive an award for her aggressive cost-cutting measures. "Mr. Miller, it is such an honor," Brenda started to say, extending her hand as she walked toward the head of the table. Then she noticed Chloe sitting there. Brenda's smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound confusion and immediate outrage. "Chloe, what on earth are you doing here? Mr. Miller, I apologize. This woman was terminated last night for gross insubordination and—" "Sit down, Brenda," Harrison ordered. The command was absolute. It cracked through the room like a whip. Brenda flinched, slowly lowering herself into a chair opposite Chloe. She looked nervously between the HR director and the CEO. Then she looked closer at Harrison's face. The pale blue eyes, the structure of his jaw. The realization hit Brenda like a physical blow. The color drained completely from her face, leaving her pale and trembling. "You," Brenda stammered, her voice suddenly high and breathless. "You were the man." "The filthy vagrant, the transient," Harrison supplied, reading directly from his leather notebook. "The man who smelled like a damp alleyway?" "Yes, Brenda. That was me." Brenda opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She looked like she might faint. "I built this company on the principle of hospitality," Harrison said, his voice deadly quiet. "Hospitality means welcoming people, taking care of them. You have turned my flagship restaurant into a toxic, hostile environment. You serve rotten food to inflate your bonuses, and you treat your employees like garbage." "Mr. Miller, please, I can explain. The pressure to meet the quarterly margins—" "You asked Chloe a question last night," Harrison interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "You said you want to talk to me about decency. Well, Brenda, I am talking to you about decency right now, and frankly, you possess none." Harrison turned to the HR director. "Gregory, process her termination. Fired for cause. Health code violations and gross misconduct. She receives no severance." Brenda burst into tears. "Please, Mr. Miller, I gave 5 years to this company." "And you have done enough damage in those 5 years," Gregory Pierce said, stepping forward. "Ms. Higgins, please come with me. Security will meet us at your car to collect your keys and company phone." Brenda stood up on trembling legs. She shot one last, venomous glare at Chloe, but the waitress didn't flinch. Brenda was escorted out of the room, her sobs echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors clicked shut. Silence descended on the boardroom. Harrison sighed, closing his leather notebook. "Good riddance. Now, Chloe, Let's talk about you." Chloe swallowed hard. "Am I getting my waitressing job back?" "No," Harrison said flatly. Chloe's heart plummeted. Had she done something else wrong? "You aren't going back to waitressing, Chloe, because the Rusty Anchor needs a new general manager," Harrison said, a broad smile returning to his face. "I need someone who understands the floor, who cares about the staff, and who possesses the moral compass to do the right thing, even when it costs them. I want you to run the restaurant." Chloe's jaw dropped. "Me? But I don't have a business degree. I've never managed a restaurant." "You have something a degree can't teach. You have character," Harrison insisted. "We will provide you with all the corporate training and operational support you need. Your starting salary will be $85,000 a year, plus full executive health benefits for you and your daughter, Lily." Tears, hot and unstoppable, spilled over Chloe's cheeks. $85,000, full benefits. She thought of the eviction notice that had been looming over her head. She thought of Lily's winter coat, the suffocating weight of poverty that had rested on her chest for 4 years, suddenly evaporated, leaving her gasping for air. I don't know what to say," Chloe sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Say yes, Chloe," Harrison chuckled softly. "And let's get that restaurant back to being a place we can both be proud of." Chloe wiped her eyes, sitting up straight. She looked at the billionaire who had walked into her life as a shivering stranger, and she gave him a radiant, tear-stained smile. "Yes, Mr. Miller. I won't let you down." The next evening, when the flickering neon sign of the Rusty Anchor buzzed to life in the Seattle rain, the atmosphere inside was entirely different. The staff moved with a renewed energy. The kitchen smelled of fresh, high-quality ingredients, and at the front door, greeting every guest with a genuine, warm smile, stood Chloe Bennett, not just surviving, but finally thriving. Did Chloe's incredible turnaround give you goosebumps? Sometimes doing the right thing when no one is watching is the ultimate test of character, and it pays off in ways you could never imagine. If you loved this story of karma and justice, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing real-life drama. What would you have done? Comment below.